most important to you and why?
Okay, once again, channeling Dean. We need to get the local economy, one, across to zero emissions. Two, we have to pay our fair share of this community's effort to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide in the air. And we also need to be pushing the 100,000 or so people, 150,000 people who live in this electorate, need to be pushing really hard to get the state government, the local government, the state government and the federal government to take on an emergency response. So that the local challenge is not so much literally what we do in our own homes just today and tomorrow, because the scale of what needs to be done is beyond what we can do through renovations and necessarily through our own personal efforts. But we need to mobilise the 150,000 people to set off a chain reaction of community activism across the country that eventually, in fact, engages everybody and gets us into the emergency mode.
My three issues, or my first issue is marriage equality, and it's a big one, and it's a very important one, and it's one that Australia is ready for. This is something that the Australian Sex Party has been pushing for since the party's inception, and it's a basic rights issue. It's not a fringe issue, and too often it's treated as such. With regards to this electorate, I know that a survey was issued which was buried inside a newsletter and promptly recycled by many. This is not an issue that necessitates a survey or a referendum or a conscience vote. I don't want to be living in a backwards nation, and I don't want us to be the last to the finish line. It's only fair that we take action. 75% of voters are not in wills are not against marriage equality, and it's something we need action on. The second issue, briefly, that I'd like to bring up is drug law reform. It's not to do with a free-for-all, it's to do with saving lives. Again, it's not a fringe issue, it's something that's completely mainstream. I'm one of the 1/3 of Australians over the age of 22 who've tried cannabis, and I'm one of the 1 million Australians who've tried it in the past 12 months, and I've enjoyed it and I'd do it again. 70% of Australians support the legalisation of cannabis. We're calling for the legalisation, regulation and taxation of it. It's a $3 to $6 billion industry, and we wouldn't like to see that going to organised crime. We'd like to see that money pumped back into health initiatives, harm minimisation initiatives and education. We want police resources to focus on actual issues like domestic violence and assault. It's time to treat drugs as health issues and not as drug use, not as a criminal issue. We need to approach it with compassion and awareness. Prohibition doesn't work, it pushes things underground. The last issue that I'd like to bring up is healthcare. What we're calling for is uniform pregnancy termination laws nationwide. Currently, in every state and territory, it looks like a dog's breakfast, and it's not fair. We want fully Medicare-funded abortion available for women. Sex Party as well recognise that it's absolutely stupid for tampons and women's sanitary products to have a GST. It's offensive. They're not a luxury item.
So I've got three local issues. The first is a human rights issue, then a social justice issue, and I want to finish up mentioning livable cities. And for a human rights issue, I think working where I do, living in Brunswick, it's obvious that equal marriage rights for same-sex attracted people is an important issue that we support. I think that it's very important for the message it sends to young same-sex attracted men and women that there's nothing wrong with you, there's nothing to be ashamed of. It's important if you care about the people you live and work with. It's important if you care about mental health. So for the social justice issue, we've had a mining boom for the past decade in Australia. We're not seeing a lot of that flowing through to this area. Since the mining tax was watered down, in the first year of the mining tax, the government made less money made from cutting benefits to single parents, and I think that's shameful. The Greens want to reverse those cuts and boost New Start payment by $50 a week. And I think as one of the richest countries in the world, we can afford to do this. And I'd like to just finish up with a few words about livable cities. We live in a city that has this vast suburban sprawl that, because of the car-dominated urban planning, widely dispersed houses and shops with double garage, rein this in a bit so that it's safe for our kids to walk to school. We need to divert federal funding. For every dollar of federal funding spent on roads, we need to spend a sizable amount on trams and trains and buses and bike paths.
First issue for me is jobs, employment, manufacturing. When I first became member for Wills, unemployment in this area was over 12%, way above the national average. It is now down below 5% and indeed below the national average. But that cannot be taken for granted. With Ford announcing its proposed closure, I had a manufacturing forum in Faulkner earlier this year. The federal government has allocated $30 million to assist the retraining of people who are impacted on by that, and I am working with automotive components suppliers in that regard. Second issue is schools. I am very proud of the fact that the federal government has put over $100 million into local schools. Just today in Faulkner I opened the BER project there, over $2 million into that school. It's the biggest investment by any government any time in this electorate, and I'm very proud of it, and I want to continue working with the Better Schools plan, which will provide $1.7 million over the course of 6 years extra for each school in this electorate. The third issue is the question of environment and local amenity. I am opposed to the East-West Tunnel and the damage that it will do to Royal Park and to the Moonee Ponds Creek. I happen to be the chair of the Friends of Moonee Ponds Creek. I am opposed to the upgrading of the Brunswick terminal station, which, if it is required, ought to be done somewhere else. And I want to support other planning issues, ensuring that local residents have a say in the kind of community in which they live. I'm proud of the $1 million we've given to Ceres, the $5 million we've given to the Moreland Solar Village. I want to see those kinds of grants and initiatives continue. Thank you.
So the three issues I've identified are cost of living, jobs and also family violence. There are only three, there's lots and lots and lots really. And I agree with quite a few things that the speakers have already said. But I think the cost of living has absolutely skyrocketed for a lot of people, which has actually reduced quality of life for a lot of people, and it's actually further entrenching inequality. And with that I mean the cost of public utilities, of food and housing especially. So what we would advocate as Socialist Alliance is actually to return gas, water and electricity into public hands, as it used to be. We tend to forget that, but it used to be in public hands. We would boost public housing, and all rents, including private rents, would need to be capped at 20% of income. At the moment we have no regulation, proper regulation of the private rental market, which is actually throwing a lot of people into homelessness. We support a massive expansion of public transport and a break-up of the super monopolies, which are keeping prices artificially high. And we certainly would encourage and support a welfare payment increase to a living wage. Around jobs, I mean, Kelvin might be right that like the unemployment rate is low, but that doesn't take into account that this includes a lot of people on insecure work, which means casualisation and also in contracts. On part-time or short-term contracts. So we advocate a very strong public investment into local manufacturing for job creation, and especially around renewable energy. But we would also advocate the nationalisation and the retooling of any company that is planning to go offshore for cheaper labour. And let's be honest, and that's why we've actually lost so much manufacturing, because they've left because they can exploit workers cheaper overseas. We would also abolish 457 visas and instead offer residency to foreign workers who are coming to Australia. Now, I've worked a lot in family violence, and family violence, the statistics are very high in Wills, and I think we need to really inject much more funding into gender-sensitive services.